This week in Jamaica Now, an innocent 44-year-old man who was locked up for murder is to get millions from the state, but a court says no money for breach of his constitutional rights. Why? Betrayal. A 20-year-old man confesses to murdering his adopted sister and burying her in a shallow grave.
Attacks on the media, that is never ever acceptable.
I believe it is dangerous. I believe that those who are doing it should stop.
Condemnation as political attacks on Jamaican journalists intensify. And the government gets $480 million to help plug the hole in the national budget. I'm Jovan Johnson and this is Jamaica Now. A 44-year-old man who spent 3 years in custody on murder and robbery charges before the prosecution offered no evidence against him in December 2017 has won a Supreme Court award of $14.6 million with interest against the government. Justice Andrea Thomas, who handed down the judgment recently, ruled that the conduct of the two police officers in the case was without probable cause, extremely inefficient and unacceptable. The defendants were the two cops, Constable Audrey Smith, Detective Constable Tashana Hines, and the Attorney General. The man, a farmer and a caretaker, described his time in police lockup as hell on earth. His attorney, Anthony Williams, lamented what he said was the careless and reckless actions of the police who failed to act on information from a witness that they had arrested the wrong person for an alleged murder. There was no award for breaches of the man's constitutional rights. The judge said that despite conditions at the lockup, the man was adequately compensated by the award for false imprisonment and aggravated damages. And the police on Tuesday found the body of 32-year-old Lisa Gay Cobre, who had been missing since September 28. A 20-year-old butcher who grew up with the Cobras and reportedly confessed to the crime led the police to the shallow grave in their community of Glengoff in St. Catherine. The deceased woman's sister, Shakira, said the family felt betrayed. Their mother had taken in the man when he was a child 10 years ago. The Jamaican government has repatriated the 20 Haitians who were picked up by the police following their arrival by boat at a beach in Kensington, Portland on October 5. The Haitians were sent back the next day. The Haitians had earlier claimed that they were fleeing prosecution, civil unrest, gang warfare and economic hardships. Local human rights groups Stand Up for Jamaica and Jamaicans for Justice have called for the government to launch a full investigation into the treatment of Haitian migrants and asylum seekers in Jamaica. In a joint release to the media, the groups said the probe should examine whether the processes to determine the status of the Haitians are in line with those detailed in Jamaica's refugee policy. They also want an examination of reports of abuse and unnecessary or arbitrary detention. The government is proposing to spend an additional $41 billion in a revised budget for the current fiscal year that ends in March next year. Outgoing Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark told Parliament this week that the money will come from an estimated additional revenue and grant inflows of $40.2 billion. The money is to cover recovery from Hurricane Beryl in July, preparatory work for a multi-billion-dollar road program called SPARK, and to support several public bodies such as the Jamaica Urban Transit Company and the Firearm Licensing Authority.
The economy is therefore expected to register a decline of 2.1% in the third quarter of the calendar year, that's June to September, on account of the economic dislocation caused by the hurricane. Remember, agriculture in many crops was completely wiped out. Now, when you put these developments together, the impact of the U.S. travel advisory on the second quarter, the impact of hurricane on the third quarter, taken together, they represent a significant growth shock, which is expected, and these are PIOJ's and BOJ's figures. They're not predictions, they're projections, which is expected to result in a contraction of negative 0.2% for the fiscal year 2024-25, down from the initially expected expansion of 1.8%.
Dr. Clark says some of the money to cover the new expenditure will come from the $480 million that the government received from the placement of a bond on the international capital market recently. The bond spans 12 years and will pay interest of 6.7%. The transaction involved the securitization of the portion of the Norman Manley International Airport revenue that is due to the Jamaican government. Securitization of the airport revenue was achieved through the bond issued by King Air. The government has granted King Air its rights to 52.33% of the revenue generated by the Norman Manley International Airport in exchange for the $480 million that was raised. The finance minister says the transaction does not represent debt obligations of the government of Jamaica or any of its agencies. And Dr. Clark told Parliament that the transaction was significant.
We are still able to maintain the downward debt trajectory, and our debt to GDP is projected to hit 67% by March 2025, which will be the lowest level in nearly 50 years. But it's not magic, Mr. Speaker. If we did not have those securitization flows, that debt trajectory would be interrupted by this growth shock. And that is something that I want us to internalize.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Andrew Holness has hit back at criticism that while the government boasts of improvements in the economy, many Jamaicans are unable to meet their basic needs. He was speaking on Thursday.
And that is a commitment of this government, that as we pursue the economic development and getting the macroeconomic variables right, the dividends from that, rest assured, the dividends from that will be reinvested in the people in tangible ways. That is why we did something like the reverse tax credit, never before in Jamaica's history, where the government is giving back to people who earn less than $3 million per year. Never before happened. That's a way in which we are making sure that the dividends of the good economic management reaches to the people. Yes, good economic management can yam.
The government has condemned recent political attacks on Jamaican journalists. Information Minister Senator Dana Morris-Dixon spoke on the matter at a post-cabinet press briefing on October 9. She said the attacks are unacceptable and reiterated the administration of Prime Minister Andrew Holness's commitment to press freedom.
You've been deadly silent despite people calling media houses politically aligned and naming journalists as being linked to parties. Why no comment from you, Minister?
No, well, you haven't asked me. So here I am now. You asked me. The reality is that this administration is very much committed to press freedom. And I think everything we have done has demonstrated that. I know you spoke about attacks on the media. That is never, ever acceptable at all. Never acceptable to attack the media. The media is very important. We believe that a country that's truly committed to democracy is one that supports the media and does not put up with anything that undermines the role of the media.
Dr. Morris-Dixon said the government has general concerns about the negative implications of social media, including bullying. And the chairman of the People's National Party, PNP, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, says the party condemns the recent attacks.
I believe that the videos are dangerous. They are dangerous because what they actually do, because of the content and how they frame the arguments, being specific about certain individuals and talking about them. It is almost as if you're fingering individuals and you're saying some things about them that could incite others to make it difficult for them to do their jobs, to go, to go around wherever the community is, the island, and so on. And so I believe it is dangerous. I believe that those who are doing it should stop. I believe that those who are close to those who are doing it should tell them to stop. And I believe, at the end of the day, that we have to set a standard for how we deal with things like these. The media doesn't always say things about us that we like. Opinions differ on issues and on the positions that we take. All of that, we understand that. There's no problem in challenging a story's point of view or challenging a perspective that someone has. But when you move it now from the action that the person did or the argument that the person made and you focus it on the person, then now that becomes a whole another kettle of fish.
The attacks come as rhetoric between the two main political parties heats up ahead of national elections due in less than 11 months. On October 7, a video with names and faces emerged accusing 6 senior Jamaica Gleaner journalists of being linked to and used by the PNP to undermine the government. The company has rejected the allegations, saying the claims put members of its team at risk of being targeted in varied ways. Ruling Jamaica Labour Party General Secretary Dr. Horace Chang says the party was not responsible for the video and that the JLP would not condone such activity. The Press Association of Jamaica has condemned the attacks. The Press Association also highlighted other instances, including attempts by PNP supporters to link the Jamaica Observer's Deputy Managing Director to influencing editorial policy, and JLP MP Everald Warmington's recent comment at a political rally accusing the RJR Gleaner Group of having an agenda against the Prime Minister. The association also cited PNP President Mark Golding's criticism at the party's annual conference in September, where he labelled some media houses as JLP aligned. In other political news, the Jamaica Labour Party's Matthew Samuda took his seat in the House of Representatives on Tuesday after being sworn in as the new Member of Parliament for St. Ann North Eastern.
I, Matthew Peter Samuda, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Jamaica, that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of Jamaica, and that I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of Jamaica. So help me God.
Mr. Samuda, who previously sat in the Senate, succeeds the JLP's Marsha Smith, whose resignation last month triggered a by-election. And that's it for this edition of Jamaica Now, your weekly review of the big news stories. Send us your comments at onlinefeedback@gleanerjm.com. Follow us on X and Instagram at Jamaica Gleaner and on Facebook at Gleaner Jamaica. Like this video on our YouTube page, turn on your notification and subscribe today. I'm Jovan Johnson, and before we go, let's hear the story of cancer survival from Naja Peterkin, who has been free of the disease for 11 years.
How I realized I had breast cancer is through self-examination. Myself and my partner, of course, we recognized that there was in fact a lump. You know, you make up all excuses about what this lump could be. You know, you think about swollen lymph nodes, you think about, oh yeah, every breast has a lump. But no, we felt it and we knew we had to get to the doctor. Went to the doctor. Part of the process is doing an ultrasound on the breast. And then you get the dreaded call. Oh, there's also the mammogram as well. So it's mammogram, then ultrasound. I wasn't 40, I was 31 when I was diagnosed actually. And we all know that you're not really told to do a mammogram until you're 40. So that's also why it's so important to do the early examination of your breasts. My scenario, I had stage 2 breast cancer. It's a triple negative, which means it's a very aggressive cancer. With that said, my team of doctors and I decided on an approach where I would do both chemotherapy and radiation, and of course the surgery to remove. That's called a mastectomy. I opted for a double mastectomy. That process took me about a year. I was diagnosed in 2011. And I was cancer-free, thank God, in 2012. Literally 1 year from when I started. Did 8 rounds of chemotherapy, 3 weeks apart. That was tough. Radiation is also tough. 20 days of treatment every day, consistently. But you do it because you know there's an end game, right? And the end game is simply to live.